Am I audible correctly?
Yes, you are very much audible.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to all of you to this webinar we are hosting today and tomorrow. My name is Fatima, and I am associated with Umran Green School. And today we are having this lecture on Rabindranath Tagore's visit to Russia. This lecture series, which is happening today as well as tomorrow, is organized by Umran Academic Research Association, UARA. UARA is also part of Umran Green School, and its founder is Mr. Rajiv Kumar, who is a research scholar at Ibn Khaldun University in Istanbul, Turkey. This organization is based both in India as well as in Turkey, and it derives its roots and inspiration from Bruce Lawrence's idea of Barzakh logic and its cosmopolitan spirit. Barzakh, of course, is a term which is in Quran, and Bruce Lawrence expands the meaning of Barzakh with something called Barzakh logic and talks about cosmopolitan spirit as well. In the past, UARA has organized 2 symposiums in 2021, March and November. And in the future, we hope to engage further with this idea of cosmopolitan spirit. And we also hope to provide stipends to research scholars who are willing to associate with us. Now, I would like to welcome our guests for today, Dr. Mousumi Banerjee and Dr. Sajal Dey. Welcome, ma'am. Welcome, sir. Dr. Mousumi Banerjee, who is the moderator for today's talk, is Associate Professor and the head of the Department of English at the English and Foreign Languages University in Shillong, India. Dr. Sajal Dey is Assistant Professor and Coordinator at the Department of Russian Studies at the English and Foreign Languages University, also in Shillong, India. Dr. Banerjee, all yours now. Thank you.
Yes, yeah. Thank you very much. So yes, I'm truly delighted to see you all. Good evening and good morning. Take it in accordance with the part of the world from where you have joined us for the program. And this to everyone present today at this webinar organized by the UMRAN Academic Research Association. I'm glad to welcome you all to the event. Rajiv and his team have again been an excellent cause of bringing us together today for this series of webinars on Rabindranath Tagore, Alexandr Pushkin, and other issues. And this is how Umran and UARA are continuously proving their steadfastness of purpose toward maintaining an academic and research goal of creating a space where thinking minds can meet and deliberate on issues that need to reach a wider audience. I warmly welcome the speaker of the day, Dr. Sajal Dey, who we are eager to listen to on the issue we have set ourselves for the purpose of our deliberations today. I welcome everyone in the audience who have joined us today. Your presence is always encouraging. The objective of this event is to think on and weigh and consider questions that make us ideate, theorize, and perceive with engagement and seriousness issues concerning our languages, literatures, cultures, societies, communities, nations, and the planet as a whole, in ways that we come to generate a meaningful discourse that we can offer to our posterity to reflect on and take it further. This is what the green perspective of Umran aims to achieve. A world of shared knowledge and human solidarity that can bind us together and foster a new humanity that would have a convincing base in peace, compassion, freedom of the mind, and autonomous thinking. Talking about the free and uninhibited mind in poem 35 of the Gitanjali, Song Offerings, Tagore says, with mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls, where words come out from the depth of truth, where tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dead habit, where the mind is led forward by thee into ever-widening thought and action. Into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake. The poet here remains in search of a creative space where knowledge will be able to transcend the barriers of nations and geographies and rise above the narrow domestic walls of confinement, inhibited spaces, and constricted ideologies. So on this note, we would like to initiate the discussion on Rabindranath Tagore's Russia visit, expectations and impressions. But before that, it is important to bring to mind some issues that may be pertinent to what we are going to reflect on in a short while from now. Today, the 29th of January, 2022, marks 91 years, 4 months, and 19 days of Tagore's visit to the Soviet Union. He had warned against, quote, the imperfect contact between the wills of the leader and the led, something that is necessary to be reckoned with at the present moment of time as well. Tagore reached the Soviet Union on September 11, 1930. Today's discussion and the deliberations that would follow would focus on the famous text Tagore's visit to Russia produced, entitled Letters from Russia. The letters were translated into Russian in 1956. Stalin reportedly wasn't pleased by the 13th letter where Tagore made critical remarks about the Soviet regime. As a result, Tagore's interview with the Russian daily Izvestia was not published in 1930 under Stalin's orders. It was finally published in 1988 under Gorbachev's regime. So as we can see, there are stark political aspects of his visit as well, but I cannot but at the same time bring into context here one remarkable comment that Tagore makes in the course of his exposition in the letters, and that is, he says, as far as the fundamental Soviet principles are concerned, they are unceasing in their endeavor to increase the inherent power of man by general education and culture. They have not continually repressed them like the fascists. Beyond all political implications and either intended or unintended connotations that the context here is imbued with, it is the eternal religion of man that Tagore's entire gamut of writing is infused with. The very faith in education and culture of a nation in building the character of a people, and the significance of the freedom of the mental faculties of societies and communities in taking a nation ahead. I'm sure Dr. Dey would focus on these issues and more in his discussion. Before I hand over the proceedings of the program to Dr. Dey, it would be my pleasure to introduce him. Dr. Sajal Dey teaches Russian language and literature at the English and Foreign Languages University, Shillong campus, Meghalaya, India. He's also the head of the Department of Russian Studies there. He obtained his PhD degree in Russian from Bhasha Bhavan, Vishwabharati, Shantiniketan, West Bengal, India. His academic interests include Russian studies, foreign languages studies, Tagore studies, social linguistics, and language rights. He translates from different languages like Hindi, Assamese, English, Russian, and Esperanto. Being a poet, he has published 4 collections of poems in Bangla and translated an award-winning Assamese novel into Bangla for the Sahitya Academy, New Delhi. Dr. Dey has also translated short stories, plays, and poems from Russian, Hindi, and English for a number of literary and scholarly journals. He's a member of the FEB committee, that is the Committee of the Indian Esperanto Federation, and is presently engaged in translating into Bangla the first Esperanto autobiography written by an Indian. So with that, over to Dr. Dey now.
Good evening. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Good evening and good day. I don't know what is the time at your part of the world. And my sincere thanks to UARA, Umran Academic Research Association, Mr. Rajiv Kumar and his collaborators. I can see here Swasti and Miss Fatima also, who started, and everybody who was gathered here to listen to this person talk. I welcome you all. I greet you all, and with that, I'll start my discussion. If you have seen the film Three Idiots, okay. If you have seen the famous film Three Idiots by, the character played by Amir Khan was saying in a crucial point, in crisis point, all is well, and the crisis passed away. And similarly, I am telling myself all is well, and hopefully the lecture will go on well. Because Rabindranath Tagore, but as you know, English-speaking people call him Tagore. So I will call him Tagore here. Is a very, very big issue. He was a polymath, as you know. He was a writer, and there is no genre of Bengali literature that he didn't touch. He wrote poetry, he wrote novels, short stories, letters, and essays, plays, every dance dramas, each and every genre of Bengali literature was enriched by Tagore. But apart from that, he was a social reformer. He was a thinker. He was a philosopher. He was a painter. He was an actor. So in true sense, he was a polymath. It is difficult to touch Tagore in a single lecture. So I will just touch upon one point. The point in time and space is the intersection when he reaches Soviet Union in 1930. As you know, there are 2 kinds of people, 2 kinds of intellectuals on this planet. They say either you are a conformist or you are a non-conformist. Now, conformist is one who supports and maintains the existing order, existing system, existing paradigm, and goes by it, explains it. But there are another type, the non-conformist ones, who will try to not to conform to those orders, those systems, those paradigms, and will try to go beyond it. Because of these non-conformist intellectuals, people, activists, our civilization goes forward. Now, there can be many, many questions on what is civilization. I'm not going into that here right now. But because of the non-conformist intellectuals, thinkers, writers, we move forward. Tagore was one. And tomorrow I will talk about another non-conformist writer, Alexandr Pushkin, who was a Russian. And incidentally, Rabindranath Tagore is the national poet of India, and Alexandr Pushkin is the national poet of Russia. What a coincidence. So today I take on Tagore's visit of Russia. Myths are not only things of the past. They do not belong to obscure periods of time only. They do exist even in modern times, contemporary days. Willingly or unwillingly, we are creating myths, living inside myths, being made to believe in myths, and thinking and acting accordingly. Such a myth is Rabindranath Tagore. Even in India, still today, many people are not aware about what he really was or what he did for his country or for humanity as a whole. Although he is supposed to be our greatest modern day cultural icon. Today, I'm going to discuss another myth associated with Rabindranath Tagore, which is his visit of Russia. A part of this myth is at least factually true, other parts are not. And connected with this myth are the expectations and impressions of both the parties, Rabindranath Tagore and the then Soviet Union. Let us begin then. That Rabindranath Tagore visited Russia in 1930 is a well-known historical fact and much celebrated by the scholars interested in Indo-Russian relations and languages, literatures, and cultures of both the countries. Tagore's Russia Chithi, or Letters from Russia, which has been published in May 1931 in English, bears testimony to his impression of the post-revolution Russia. The collection of letters was read, talked about, cited, discussed, debated, and analyzed many times. A part of these letters that talks about his visit and the massive progress in education, agriculture, and other sectors that he observed in Soviet Union has been showcased in post-independence era and used as a tool to promote Indo-Soviet relations. We all felt happy about it. And that really helped in strengthening the ties between the two countries. We Indian Russists fondly remember in our Russian textbook a piece on Tagore and his Russia visit. And truly enough, Soviet Union has been a great ally of ours, an all-weather ally. And Tagore's image and letters played an important role in building the alliance. Although at the moment, these two countries are having mainly cultural, economic, and commercial interactions only, but that is another story. It is true that Rabindranath wanted to visit post-revolution Russia for quite some time. After a few futile attempts, his desire was ultimately fulfilled in 1930. What he primarily wanted to see was the all-embracing spread of education in the Soviet system and its results. His letters, right from the first one, bear testimony to his impression of the new awakened Russia. In the very first line of his very first letter from Moscow, he writes, "In Russia at last," I quote, "in Russia at last, whichever way I look, I am filled with wonder. It is unlike any other country. It is radically different. From top to bottom, they are rousing everybody up without distinction," unquote. Letters 1. In spite of a few harsh remarks that he made later on, this feeling of wonder about Russia lasted throughout the connection. But wherever he criticized, he was very severe and did not spare the hosts. But what made Tagore miss the earlier chances? Let us have a look. He was formally invited in 1926 and again in 1928, but could not make it before 1930 because of many reasons. One of the reasons was that some of his friends dissuaded him from going there on some ground or the other. Tagore's health was an issue, but that was not the only issue people were afraid of. Some people did not want that Tagore should visit Russia because the Britishers did not want the visit to take place. They had always been afraid of Russian influence on India or the Indians. I have shown it in one of my earlier papers that India deliberately delayed the opening of an consulate. British India deliberately delayed the opening of a consulate for 40 years. Okay. Even Tagore's biographer, Prabhat Kumar Mukhopadhyay, quotes in his Rabindra Jivani from a report published by an American journalist. I quote, although actively abstaining from politics, Tagore revealed while resting in Geneva that he is heart and soul for the Indian nationalist movement. It is understood. It is because of impetus which his presence might give to pro-Gandhi sentiment in the USA and Russia that the coterie of Englishmen who surrounded him here was continuously against his trips for reasons of health. I quote from Arun Shom's book, 52. Unquote. After receiving the first invitation in 1926 from Vox, Vox is the cultural organization which actually made the invitation to him. After receiving the first invitation in 1926 from Vox, he told in an interview, I quote, I shall go to Russia, want to see the country of Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, Solovyov. I quote from Basu. But he was not scheduled to meet any of the leading living writers when he actually was in Moscow in 1930 for 14 days. This was a huge surprise. Tolstoy's famous Yasnaya Polyana was situated at a distance of 200 kilometers only from Moscow. But he was not supposed to pay a visit to that famous abode too. Remember, Tagore was not an ordinary traveler. He was a Nobel laureate. In fact, the very first one from Asia. Not only from Asia, he was the very first from the non-European world. Before Tagore, nobody from the other than the European countries got a Nobel. He was translated into Russian even before the Nobel Prize was awarded to him in 1913. And he was invited by the Russians for the third time. Then what could have been the reason for such an itinerary where a Nobel-winning writer does not meet any of the top writers of the country he was visiting? We have some clues which will be discussed gradually. Now, let us make it very clear that Tagore's reception, meetings, and movement were restricted within the city of Moscow mostly. And one cannot really call it a Russia visit in the full sense of the word. Amir Chakraborty was one of the two secretaries who accompanied Tagore along with a few other persons. Himself a celebrated academician, Chakraborty had also written a few letters from Moscow, and named them Moscow Er Chithi, means letters from Moscow. This title appears to be more apt than that of Tagore. It would not be incorrect to say that Tagore's Russia visit was more like a conducted tour. I take this term from Basu. It was a conducted tour, a very tightly scheduled one, whereas his companions were relatively free, as evident from their writings. Chakraborty writes that he visited at least 2 places that Tagore did not. The first one was the Museum of the Godless. I repeat, the Museum of the Godless. And the second one was a Russian prison. It goes without saying that Chakraborty and others had to get necessary approval from the Soviet authorities for visiting these places too. So Rabindranath's Russia visit was a short one, lasting only for 14 days, from 11th to 25th September 1930. He did not meet any big literary figure or political leader. He did not go anywhere outside Moscow. Even the great city of St. Petersburg and its world-famous Hermitage Museum remained unseen by him, even if we forget Tolstoy's Yasna Polyana. Now, please remember that Tagore was himself a celebrated artist, painter. He was not supposed to pay a visit to any of these places. He was shown mainly what the Soviet authorities wanted to be shown to him. It was more of a conducted tour that I already told. Now, why so is the question. There appears to have been a tacit understanding between Vaux and Tagore as far as his Russia visit was concerned. In fact, earlier in 1926, he hinted to A.Y. Arosev in Stockholm that it would be better if the invitation came from any writers' organization or intellectual association. Arosev probably understood that he wanted to avoid direct contact with the top political leaders of Russia or Soviet Union. In fact, Tagore himself declares in his 8th letter dated 4th October 1930 from Atlantic Ocean, I quote, "In visiting Russia, my only object was to see in a short time what is being done there for the spread of education and its results," unquote. So there was no meeting of the Nobel laureate with the top brass of the Soviet leadership in the 2 weeks that he was there, not even with Anatoly Lunacharsky or any prominent writer. Instead, he visits Society for Cultural Relations, which is Vaux, a concert at the Federation of Soviet Writers in Moscow, a musical recital, a pioneer commune, a cinema union, the Central Peasants' House, an exhibition of his drawings at the State Moscow Museum of New Western Art, 2 Moscow art theaters, and a musical program. He talks with the children, with the peasants, the art critics, and the students. But Tagore does not even once mention Stalin or Lenin in his entire collection of letters. This, in spite of the fact that much of the information Tagore and his companions collected was from the official propaganda material supplied by the Soviet authorities themselves. So it has to be admitted that there existed a fair amount of uneasiness lurking behind, although he was more than happy to see the results of the great Soviet experiment in its actuality. My take is that not only Tagore wanted to visit and learn from Russia, particularly as far as the spread of education was concerned. But Russia too wanted him to meet Russia. Let us remember that Tagore was again invited in 1937 to visit Russia. In fact, Russia needed Tagore, like many other luminaries of the world intelligentsia, to like her and in his turn influence the world opinion. Russia was really struggling on many fronts at that point of time. She thought she was surrounded by enemies who wanted to destroy the newly born state and the system. She badly needed the likes of Tagore as supporters. So the visit was not a one-sided affair at all. In spite of that, a great thinker that he was, Rabindranath could correctly spell the problems associated with the Soviet system that was apparently producing marvelous results in education and other sectors. Some of his comments on Russia proved to be prophetic in the long run. Although the portions containing adverse comments by Rabindranath were severely edited and never published in Russia until much later. It was only in 1986, as my colleague Mousumi Banerjee told, that the deleted portions were translated into Russian and published, and amazed the new generation of Russian readers with the accuracy of his analysis and prediction. Before leaving Moscow, in an interview with the famous Russian newspaper Izvestia, Rabindranath said, I quote, "But I find here certain contradictions to the great mission you have undertaken. Certain attitudes of mind are being cultivated which are contrary to your ideal. I must ask you, are you doing your ideal a service by arousing in the minds of those under your training anger, class hatred, and revengefulness against those not sharing your ideal, against those whom you consider to be your enemies? For the sake of humanity, I hope that you may never create a vicious force of violence which will go on weaving an interminable chain of violence and cruelty. Already you have inherited much of this legacy from the Tsarist regime. It is the worst legacy you could possibly have. You have tried to destroy many of the other evils of that regime. Why not try to destroy this one also?" Unquote. This was a severe blow in spite of his admiration for other achievements of the Soviet system. For obvious reasons, this was not published in Izvestia, but a few weeks later, on 30th October 1930, it came out in Manchester Guardian when Rabindranath was in America. Not only adverse comments of Rabindranath Tagore, but Soviet authorities wanted to erase the memory of Soumendranath Tagore also as far as possible. Soumendranath Tagore was actually Rabindranath's elder brother's grandson, and he was one of the companions who was with him. In the book Traditions of Great Friendship, published as late as in 1985, authors Evgeny Chelishev and Alexei Litman write, I quote, "Tagore was rendered great assistance in getting to know Soviet reality more deeply by those who accompanied him on his journey. His secretaries Adanyakam, Amir Chakrabarti, his friend Harry Timbers, and Margot Einstein, daughter of the famous German physicist." Unquote. There is absolutely no mention of Soumendranath, the other Tagore. This statement becomes not really a mistake, but a strategic deletion. Because nobody was actually more acquainted with Russia than Somendranath in the whole group. How? As I told, Somendranath was the grandson of Rabindranath Tagore's elder brother Dijendranath. He was one of the pioneers of communist movement in India. Although the name has not been uttered by many of the historians of mainstream communism in India. After a short period of early romance with Gandhism that failed to answer some of the basic questions he had in his mind, Somendranath was attracted to socialism. He went to Russia in 1927, took lessons of communism from Bukharin himself, got admitted in the Lenin course at the Marx Engels Institute, and also learned Russian language very well. A formidable intellectual, Somendranath never faltered to express his opinion, even in Stalinist Russia. He debated with Bukharin, disputed Gorky's opinion regarding proletarian literature, and opposed the Kuzinin thesis in the 6th World Congress of Comintern held in 1928. Shortly after that, he went away, but came back to Russia in 1930 along with Rabindranath. Not only was he a pioneer of communist movement in India, Somendranath Tagore was an internationally acclaimed communist intellectual and theorist, next only to M.N. Roy. One of the reasons of Tagore's interest in Russia was this man himself. They influenced each other a lot. So the name of this man was simply erased. Being a communist himself, Somendranath was not ready to accept the Russian nationalism propagated and forced by Stalin's regime as communist internationalism. Moreover, his strong debate and opposition to the thesis forwarded by Otto Kuzinin, who was a follower of Stalin, of course, in the 6th World Congress of Comintern, made Somendranath an eyesore for the propagators of the official Soviet narrative. And because of him, a small correction had to be admitted in the original thesis, although it was not sufficient. He even protested the way Leon Trotsky was thrown out of the party and the country. These are the reasons that even his name was censored by the Soviet authorities, the reflection of which is found everywhere, including the above-mentioned book of Chelishev and Littman. The response of Tagore to the telegraphic queries of Professor F.N. Petrov of Vox that he sent to Tagore in 1931 as a follow-up of his 1930 visit is worth mentioning here. Rabindranath cabled the following words in reply. I quote, "Your success is due to turning the tide of wealth from individual to collective humanity. Our obstacles are social and political inanity, bigotry, illiteracy." I repeat, your success is due to turning the tide of wealth from individual to collective humanity. Our obstacles are social and political inanity, bigotry, and illiteracy, unquote. This last line helps us understand Tagore's response better to the Russian question, because he was all the time comparing the condition of Russia with the condition of his own country that was suffering under British yoke at the time. It was precisely for that reason that he wanted to visit Russia. And because of these comparisons, publication of the English translation of letters in Modern Review was banned by the British government in 1934. but the damage had already been partially done by that time. All the original letters had been published in the Bengali literary journal Bichitra, and the book in Bengali has come out. Nevertheless, the government did not want the letters to be published in English, which would have caused much more damage worldwide for the Britishers. That means Tagore's letters did neither please the Soviets nor the Britishers completely. That is what the fate of the true non-conformists, happened. That's what happens to the true non-conformists. Many people don't like them. We can draw a parallel with the Bengali poet Qazi Nazrul Islam, who was a truly true representative of both the amity, the secularism, and the connection between both the communities of Hindu and Muslim. But both the Hindus and the Muslims, didn't like him. Some, of course. Some Orthodox Muslims didn't like him for writing Shama Sangit. Some Orthodox Hindus didn't like him for writing, for his writings that had Islamic overtones. So that happens to the true non-conformists, as I wanted to say at the beginning. At the end of the day, in spite of his international image, Tagore was an Indian in his core, and he wanted to see and implement whatever was beneficial to his people. His university in Vishwabharati, in Shantiniketan, is just one example of what he did or wanted to do. In fact, he has commented at one point that whatever he saw in Russia was actually what he wanted to do in the other campus of Vishwabharati, that is Sriniketan. Be it agriculture, be it education, be it other developments. Actually, this was his project. And he really was surprised. That how come a government can give mass education? How can education reach all? So with this, I think I will finish my talk, and there can be many questions. I welcome questions and comments, objections, whatever you have.
Okay, yes. So we have had the talk. So I'm sure after that, we would definitely be having questions. Is there anything in the box? Because I have many, but firstly, I would like to hear from the audience if they have. So, okay, so someone in the message box is wanting to know from where she can access the letters from Russia, especially the 13th letter in English. Is it available in Bangla? But she says she cannot get it in English. So I think she could be helped out. Yeah.
I don't know, but I think it is now available. As far as I know, it is available nowadays. There's an archive made by Jadavpur University, right? Professor Banerjee? Isn't there an archive made by Jadavpur University, Tagore Archive? I think she can try there.
Sorry, sir, I think I tried.
Could you please repeat that? Because, yes, you are not quite audible.
Me?
Okay. Okay,
Okay.
yeah, this is Preeti. This is Preeti from Jawaharlal Nehru University.
Okay.
So, sir, I actually tried looking for this material in the archive departments also, but everywhere I found it in Bangla language, and since it is
Okay.
available in PDF, so I couldn't get the English translation of it, and that's the only concern. I mean, if any where I can access it in English so that I can make use of it. So that was.
I had an idea that it has already been published in English, because in Bengali it is available. Even in Russian after 1986 it is available. So I had no
Okay,
idea
okay.
that this. Okay,
No,
so
no. If it is available in English, Russian, that would be fine.
oh, sorry,
Yeah.
is it Preeti Das? Is it Preeti
Yes,
Das
sir.
from?
Yes, sir. Yes,
Okay,
sir.
okay. Nice to see you.
Yes. I'm sorry. I actually I had gone through surgery today, so I can't switch on my video.
Okay.
But yeah. Okay.
Okay,
Mm.
how's your daughter?
Everything is fine, sir. She's doing
Okay,
well. Yeah. Yeah.
okay, okay.
Mm.
Okay. Any others?
Yes, so there is another question which says, when Rabindranath Tagore visited Russia, he was not allowed to leave Moscow, and neither the Soviets nor the British liked his letter. He was not allowed to meet any of the big leaders of that time, and his letters were not published during Stalin's time. Yes, I mean, everyone knows that. That's a piece of history, of course, which is not unknown now. His letters were not published during Stalin's time, but during Gorbachev's time. Why was Stalin's time was it not published? Yes, so she's wanting to know the reason as to why Stalin did not let the letters publish. Yeah.
Okay. So let me make one thing very clear. I am trained in Russian studies, not in political science, not in international relations, not in anything else. But yes, standing from here, from my location, and from the basis I have from my education, I will just say whatever is written and whatever documents I have with me. I cannot guess why Stalin didn't do that. I mean, I cannot guess properly, but my guess is that, and I have reasons to believe that, Stalin did not like India that much. If you say why, say if you remember, the Indo-Soviet collaboration started after Stalin died. In another article of mine, where I traced the history of Russian studies in India, I have clearly shown that in Nikita Khrushchev's time, this Indo-Russian ties grew, and exchanges, cultural exchanges, scientific and technological exchanges, everything thrived. We started a lot of departments of Russian language, literature, and culture in India. It was in Nikita Khrushchev's time. In Stalin's time, nothing like that happened. And of course, those letters, my God, there were so many comments, so many harsh comments against the Soviet system. How could he like that? It is obvious that he will not like. And I'm not surprised. Have I answered it correctly? I mean, are you satisfied?
Yeah, I want to ask something.
Yes, please.
I have actually two questions, and one of those is just a comment. You can comment on that if you like. When you mentioned Tagore as a non-conformist poet or an artist, and you also say that he was a nationalist. So in this whole framework of, let's say, world literature, or even if we don't take into consideration the framework of world literature, how do we locate or how do we negotiate with these two categories of being a non-conformist and also a nationalist? Because can a nationalist be a non-conformist and vice versa? I'm just curious to know that.
Yes, I'll answer to that. Firstly, this conformist and non-conformist is a very broad category. And one may not be non-conformist to all the ideas that he's connected with. He can be non-conformist to one and conformist to another. And secondly, nationalist question, I think you know better. Tagore's take on nationalism.
Yeah.
He was vehemently against the concept of nationalism.
Against it.
To him, it's a Western concept implanted in India. India never had a nation or the concept of nationality. India had Swadeshi Samaj. That was his term. We had a Swadeshi Samaj. Minute self-government units in our villages. We never had a nation. Okay. And I go back to my earlier comment that these are broad categories. One may not be non-conformist against everything that he is connected with. One can start with one and we may be conformist to another. Like he said, Bhalo Ingraj, Kharap Ingraj. He welcomed Britishers. You see his poems, Esho Esho Aaj Tumi Ingraj. He welcomed English people, and many British people and Britishers helped him in many ways. But he was not supporting the British colonialism in India. So conformity and non-conformity, all are context-based, I think. Is it okay?
Okay, so yeah, from where I'll just make one more comment, and that is when we talk about non-conformism, especially in Russian literature, I can think of the character of Bazarov, Turgenev's Bazarov. So do you want to say something about that? I mean, that kind of non-conformism and the kind of conformism Tagore represents.
No, I think
Bazarov, where
no, I think these are totally two different contexts. Both are non-conformism, but the two different contexts, I think, because Bazarov's case was totally inside one country. I mean, the intra Russian problem, but here it has an international connotation. In Tagore's case, we were colonized for 200 years by the Britishers, and our condition of health and economics and our education was horrible. That is what he wanted to see in Russia. So I don't think these two are comparable. Russia was equally bad, but that is another question, another context, I think. These two are not comparable to my mind. Okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Any other
Okay,
question?
fine. So yes, there are some questions over here. I think the next one is, did Tagore share some bond with Maxim Gorky? Was there any kind of similarity or dissimilarity in their teachings?
I cannot
That
comment
is
on
one.
that. No, I cannot comment on that because I don't think there was any similarity between Maxim Gorky's way and Tagore's way. Apart from the thing that both wanted their people to progress, to have their hill. I mean, as Tagore said, "Chitta jita bhaya shunno mukto jita shir." So that way, everybody wanted, both of them wanted their countrymen to be having the progress, the fruits of progress. Apart from that, I don't think there is any common ground.
Right. So next question is why Tagore had not visited contemporary famous writers. Okay, he says that he couldn't listen to that part of the discussion because his network was poor and he had to leave the session. So he wanted to be discussed once again. Why Tagore had not visited contemporary famous writers.
Because it was not in the schedule. It was not in the schedule made by the Soviet authorities. Although he was a Nobel laureate. In fact, the first Nobel laureate outside the European world. And Russians had been translating him since long. In fact, you will be surprised to know that Rabindra Rachanabali, Tagore's collections, has been printed in Russia 3 times, maybe more than 3 times, but I can recall 3 times. And the last time, during his 100th birth anniversary, lakhs of copies were sold. So Tagore was very, very popular over there, but still he could not meet any prominent writer at that time. It was not in the schedule.
Right. So I think apart from that, we have one more question. What, according to you, was Tagore's vision of an independent India? Did he think of India as a singular nation or multiple nations? Has he explicitly talked about the future of independence, though he didn't live to see it? So there are 3 questions, in fact, in one.
I think it is from Rohan.
Yeah, the first one is what, according to you? Yes. What, according to you, was Tagore's vision of an independent India? Is the first of his 3 questions. Yeah.
So Tagore was more of a cultural worker, cultural activist, rather a political one. Shortly, he was connected with Congress, but he came back. And he wanted to develop India on the cultural lines. And because he, his idea, as I told you, and Professor Banerjee also might agree, that his idea of self-government was Swadeshi Samaj, the minute units of rural India, where he thought that the strength of India was there. So he wanted to strengthen those units through education, through health, through agriculture. The entire Sriniketan project was about that. But whether he wanted India to be a nation according to the European standard, I do not know. I mean that way he perhaps never visioned India. But yes, of course, he wanted one India and not many Indias, as is very clear from his poem. I mean, you see his poems, Bharat Mat, I mean, this Jana Gana Mana and any other poem. He wanted to have one India, not many Indias.
Yeah. So the next part of his question is, did he think of India as okay? That is something that has been answered already. And the third part is, has he explicitly talked about the future of independence, though he didn't live to see it?
I don't remember. I mean, definitely he talked about, but not in such clear. I mean, not in such terms. I think. I mean, his developmental project was all he has visioned. I mean, and since he was not satisfied with the Shantiniketan project, then he later on in his later life moved on to Sriniketan, because he thought that the real India lives in the rural areas. So he focused more on rural development. And that is from where the Sriniketan project came.
Well, right. I don't think there is...
empowering the rural folks, the real Indians. Yeah, that's what he wanted to do.
Yes. So, yes, I don't think there are any more questions. But still, if anyone wishes to ask, of course, can go ahead. You can still, yes, write your questions in the message box here. So yes, this is a very important work by Tagore, and you see, any work of Tagore that you pick up, you would find, as I always say, a very profound philosophy, and in the letters from Russia, we would also find, you know, a wedding together, a bringing together of materialist and moral philosophies. Right now, it is a document that is having, you know, varied kind of implications. In fact, it could be taken as a political treatise. It can be taken as a literary and a cultural, document. It can be a historical, in fact, document. So it is many a thing at one and the same time, right? And that was in the very nature of his being as a writer, because he visited many parts of the world, and he actually came to usher Vishwa Bharati, because I mean, from the light of these varied philosophies, once again, because you see, Vishwa Bharati was a place where he could bring the world into one place, and of course, his idea of India is is or was a universal one, right? Because he wanted to see India as a holistic nation that would be able to rise above all nationalist barriers. You see, his views on nationalism are or were extremely novel at that point of time, and he was a revolutionary because he is at certain points of time misread, or misinterpreted, or maybe misenvisaged, misconceptualized too, as someone who might have had a very let's say a very positive, if I may say so, relationship with the British regime, but that may only be apparent, right? So I think he had a very novel and a revolutionary ideal insofar as nationalism is concerned. So his nationalism was actually rising or transcending, the barriers of confinement and limited kind of a vision, and yes, bigotry and as I said, constricted ideologies. He was for the autonomy of the mind, right? So he was for the evolution of the Indian mind, in fact, because he was envisaging a different kind of an Indian mind that would be able to respond to the changing world, as it were. So he was envisaging, as I said, a different kind of India, a new India. I think that would be very different from perhaps any other nation in the world. So in a sense, I think Tagore can also be called, not only a revolutionary but also an avant-garde, right? So because his philosophy does reflect that. And another point is education. So if you look at the letters over here, or if you look at his other writings, this ideal of a universalist education is extremely prominent, and he was definitely impressed by the then educational system that was there, prevalent in Russia, and it was that ideal that he was trying to implement in his own way, in his own system. I mean, in the system of education, in the kind of education that he envisaged in the form of Vishwa Bharati. So, and the very name Vishwa Bharati, you see, that is to bring the world inside one place, inside India. And it would be a place where all cultures of all the nations of the world would come and merge. So Vishwa Bharati would emerge as a point of confluence of cultures. So that is something that emerges from his letters very much. It might not have been published in Stalin's time. It might have been published in Gorbachev's time. But that's a matter of history. That's a matter of I would say rather, political history. But that does not, or that should not prohibit us from seeing the letters from Russia along with other writings that profoundly speak of the kind of education he envisaged, the ideal of education that he wanted to spread across. That should, I mean, these political interpretations should not prevent us from interpreting his work, looking at his work, critically considering his work in a very liberal manner, in a new way, let's say, because his letters from Russia and the other writings are still relevant. We are looking at these letters even today. We are looking at his other writings even today. We are considering his ideal of nationalism even today. What makes us do that? That's a primary question, because it still resonates with us, because it still resonates with the current situation that we are passing through, right? So I think there is a lot to discuss on Tagore's philosophy, on Tagore's way of looking at education, on Tagore's ideal of not only idea, but also ideal of a nation. And that was New India, in fact. So I think there are certain more comments or maybe certain other questions over here.
Hello, Motion ma'am.
Yes.
This is Dhurjati here.
Yes. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, ma'am.
Yes.
I just wanted to pose a quick question to sir.
Yes.
I'll just take.
Yes, please go ahead. Yeah.
Actually, this is just picking up from what you had spoken on. Conformism or non-conformity, because this is the question that has been bothering me of late. That when we talk about non-conformity of a particular leader or a particular personality, so are we actually talking about him or her being against the state? Is it being anti-state, or is it being against the ruling ideology? Because we have seen that, because those very figures are appropriated within the ruling ideology in the subsequent period of time. We have seen that happening across history, right? So, and that is one. And secondly, is it because of a very futuristic point of view? Because Tagore's writings on nationalism are highly futuristic, very prophetic. Is it because of that they tend to threaten the status quo, that they become non-conform, conform with reality? So how do you see Tagore vis-a-vis his, ideas on nationalism and, his stance, vis-a-vis the ruling ideology of his time? I mean, I want you to answer this not from the perspective of political science, but from the perspective of a literary or a cultural theorist.
You are asking me, Dhurjati? You asked me?
Yes, it's to you. You are the center of attraction to me. Sir.
Okay. I'm nothing like that. I am a student. I am a student like you. I mean, like you are. We all learn all the time. And I'm not into much of the theory as well, as you know. My background is Russian studies, and I will continue that. And also, I am an avid Tagore reader. Yeah,
from that
the point is,
I want you to respond to this.
Yeah. The point is that conformity and non-conformity, as I told earlier, explained that it can take many shapes, many forms, to which you are non-conforming, to which you are protesting, to which to what actually you are not agreeing with, you want to go beyond. But whether you are being appropriated for a particular cause or particular ideology, that is a totally different thing. Because most of the people in India, I tell you frankly, have not read Tagore. You'll be surprised to know that in our headquarters, one famous professor asked another lady professor, well, Tagore was a spiritual writer. He wrote Gitanjali, which is hymns to God, that's all. Now, if that is the assessment of Tagore, and if one puts Tagore in that category, what can we do? I mean, that is actually the perception of people. Tagore was a polymath. Now, do you read Tagore's short stories? I will tell you another story, which is real. Khushbant Singh, the famous journalist Khushbant Singh was very popular or famous for his comments, rash comments, once told that the Bengalis have three holy cows. One is Tagore, another is Ramakrishna, another is Subhash, as you know. Now, some Bengalis were not happy with that, of course. So he was given proper answer, but he continued that kind of talk. The Bengalis have three holy cows. They always talk on these people. After 30 years of that, he read Rabindranath Tagore's short stories in William Radhich's translation. Then he writes, oh no, this man knew how to write short stories. Now, this is the perception of a leading journalist of India who has no idea what Tagore is. Now, if he puts Tagore in a particular slot, particular category, in particular ideology, what can we do? We can only tell them, be educated, read him, read more of him. And another point, there are many Tagores. There are many Tagores. What Tagore did when he was 30 years old, 20 years old, is not the Tagore when he took up the Sriniketan project. So which Tagore you are talking about? No. And definitely, as Professor Banerjee told, his idea of nationalism, surpasses, goes beyond the narrow confines. His take on nationalism, narrow confines of this thing. And that nationalism is the root cause of many of the problems we see all over the world today. So in that sense, also Tagore was prophetic. But now, if because of some of his songs, if one puts him in a particular category and puts him inside a particular ideology, what can we do, Dhurjeti? We are helpless.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
Professor,
Is it
please
done?
unmute yourself.
Ma'am, you are muted. Mousumi, ma'am, you are muted.
Yeah, so I think that was his avant-garde-ness. I mean, if you talk about his non-conformism, he was that right from the beginning, and he had a very deep, I would say, philosophical stance of looking at these ideas of nation and nationhood, and Indianness and so on. So I think he was in that sense a nonconformist, very truly speaking, because he did not endorse the kind of nationalism that was then at that point of time practiced, right? So he differed from that. And of course, I mean, if you look at his novel Ghare Baire, I mean, Home and the World, you would find how metaphorically, I mean, he presents this idea of nationalism over there. So it's rather a thing of the mind, and that needs to be reflected in one's action. So nationalism is not everything about confrontation. You see, political confrontation, of course, is one aspect, but that should not amount to what nationalism should be, in fact, according to Tagore. So he envisaged nationalism in a very philosophical way, in that sense, I would say. And of course, there was an intense intellectuality in the way in which he envisaged nationalism. So I think that point needs to be understood. And of course, as I said, that his novelty of thought, so far as nationalism is concerned, lies there in his avant-gardeness, in his dare, in fact, to view a new India, right? And new India definitely would mean an India that would be politically independent, but at the same time that would be, able to actually bring together all the cultures of the world within its own self. So India as a whole, to him, was a kind of an idea rather than a country. Of course, I mean, the geographical boundaries are there, which, of course, again, divide nations, which make nations apart. In fact, that is something that we have done. I mean, that man has done, that cartographers have done. But, Tagore's idea of a nation was completely different, because he was trying to envisage a nation that would be free of boundaries, where knowledge would be free, where culture would be free, where where he would be able to see a free mind, developing a free consciousness that would be, developing from the very idea of India. So, sometimes I don't know whether I could go to that extent. Sometimes I feel, Tagore's idea of nation is sometimes akin to, the Kantian ideal of enlightenment. I mean, if I'm allowed to, make that comparison. So if you go through Kant's, I'm talking about Immanuel Kant's essay, What is Enlightenment? Kant in that essay was trying to envisage an enlightened society. But he, at the same time, is aware of the fact that, not all the citizens of a particular country, or maybe all the members of a particular society, can be enlightened at the same time. So there have to be certain people, who have to take this responsibility in order to usher, that kind of a consciousness, right? That kind of a novel consciousness, if not wholly non-conformist, but of course a novel consciousness, who would again, teach the others as to how to develop that kind of an educative mind, So that kind of a cultural consciousness, in fact. So Kant said that in his essay, "What is Enlightenment?" And I see that echo in Tagore as well. He was actually trying to envisage an enlightened nation, but he at the same time knows that it is not possible in a day, because it would need some let's say intellectual leaders like him, who would take the responsibility, in training people's minds, right, and giving birth to a new kind of an India that would be able to not only confront a particular foreign rule, but also be independent in its own self, be able to create its own culture, be able to know its own self, right? Be able to nurture an independent consciousness, right? So I think that is the kind of India, an enlightened India, in fact, he was trying to arrive at, and therefore, the establishment of Vishwabharati, you see, a confluence of cultures in one place, and that is why you see he invited scholars from around the world, in fact, to come over and deliberate with the intellectuals there, and of course with the students over there. So that is a larger vision of education and a new India that he was trying to conceive, not only through letters from Russia, but also through, I think, the entirety of his oeuvre, particularly his essays. Though his plays, his short stories, his novels are intensely metaphorical, but still, I think his vision comes out more explicitly in his essays, as it were, and that is how we understand how an avant-garde artist he was. In fact, polymath, of course, but avant-garde in ways perhaps nobody else during his time was. Yeah. Yes. So yes, good question, Dhurjyoti. Yes. Thank you for that question.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And Dhurjyoti, I want to say that just remember that line that he said, "Dibe and nibe, milabe milibe jabe na fire." You see, he invited even the Britishers that you come, you give, and we give, we exchange. It's not that only you give and we accept. There should be an honorable exchange between us. That was his idea of internationalism. Any other question?
Yes. Okay. Fine. So I don't think so. No more questions. Well, one question is there in the midst that we could not pick up, and that is, what has Tagore said about spirituality? What has Tagore? I think this, yes, has been taken up in various ways through the
Yeah,
course
yeah,
of this discussion. Yes, please go ahead. Yeah, if you have anything to add to that question.
No, I think we have discussed about it. He was
Yes,
wanted the spirit to be
yes.
free, the head to be held high, the mind to be free, and in that sense only. But but in the other sense of spirituality is not directly related to our talk here. In this context, we are not related to not talking about the other sense of spirituality, which he was very much in at personal level. He was a spiritual person. He was a very much devoted person to his own God, not any, I mean, in that sense, the institutional God, any religious God. But the spirit and the mind of people, he wanted it to be enlightened, it to be elevated, so that it becomes free.
Yes, of course. I think the best way in which this question can be answered is, you see, he believed in the religion of man, right? And the
Yes,
religion of man is also a famous essay by Tagore.
yes, yes,
I think he was a person who had a strong faith in humanity. He was, in that sense, a pantheist, I would say, a universalist also, in one sense. A pantheist because, he definitely was a romanticist. He was a worshipper of nature. So his God was everywhere, right? So I think uh, uh, he wanted to convey that in several ways, in varied ways, as I said, through his writing. So his religion was one of man. His religion was one of nature, and I think these two themes, in fact, are there scattered throughout his work immensely and intensely. So he was definitely influenced by his European counterpart. I mean, his European romantic counterparts, as it were. Of course, Wordsworth was there, and Shelley was there. So he was definitely influenced by a lot of English romanticists at the time. But you see, I mean, the ideal of nature that he arrived at was again novel. So whatever I say, I think the word novel, and then you see again the expression novelty would come time and again. So because he was developing his own idea of spirituality, he was developing his own idea of universality, right? So as I said, his God was everywhere. His God was in man, in fact, right? So he believed in man, and he understood man to be his highest religion. So I think his spirituality lay in the expression of the highest virtues of man, because he believed in such an education system, or educational system, whatever you like, that would inculcate in the students, in fact, or the takers of that form of education, this moral ethics, this element of moral ethics, right? That nothing lies above man, in fact, you see. So and perhaps I'm not sure, but that echoes again Swami Vivekananda's philosophy, right? So to Swami Vivekananda as well, man was the highest religion, isn't it? So to Tagore as well, it was true. So he was not a worshipper of idols as such, right? So he did not idolize any particular god, let's say, in that sense, because that was not spirituality for him. His spirituality was everywhere in the universe. He was a transcendentalist in that sense also, you could say. So because he was profoundly influenced by as I said, romanticists like Wordsworth, Coleridge, Shelley, and so on. So yes, but he was trying to create a new poetics of his own. That is also true. A new philosophy of his own, a new nation of his own, a new people of his own. Yeah, yes. Okay, so still more, I'm not sure. Okay, there is one more question from Gauri. What were his ideas on caste? Okay, so I think these questions are very interrelated. You see, he never kept his belief on caste. I don't think he really believed in any divisive ideology. Okay, and he responded to the British reign also in similar ways. I mean, along similar lines, because he was very much for the annihilation of caste, right? So I don't think he really had belief in anything, not only caste, that could potentially divide the nation. Right? So his was a universalist philosophy, as we said, as Dr. Dey also said a while back, that his was not a divisive philosophy. His was a unifying philosophy, right? So so caste is such a such a phenomenon, a social phenomenon that was to him unfortunate, and that could potentially, to repeat myself, divide a nation that is multi-ethnic, that is multi-religious, that is multilingual and multicultural. Right. So so I think he really believed in such a unifying philosophy rather than something that could cause the nation to fall apart. Yes. Dr. Dey, would you be adding something to the question?
Yeah. I think in the poem Bharat Tirtho, the pilgrimage that is India, he has clearly said, he's clearly called out to each and everyone, to Brahman, to Shudra, to Chandal, to Ingraj, to each and every one to come and take part in this great pilgrimage, and that is India. I mean, he has called out, named out each and every group. So it is clear that he didn't believe in any division, any kind of division in that sense. Thank you.
Right. Yes.
Actually, we need to. Actually, Mousumi, I think we need to read more of Tagore. Tagore has been more of a myth, as I started by saying. He has been more of a myth, and he has not been properly read, I believe, in its entirety. Yes, he should be read more.
My anxiousness is somewhere else. Even if he is properly read, he's sometimes, is misinterpreted, right? So his philosophy has been, visaged. So I think that there lies the point. So we as 21st century critics and readers have to rise above, the influences of conventional readings, right? So we would have to make our own interpretations that would be free from all misconceptions, that would be free from all preconceived notions, and that would be free from all shibboleths, right, and conventional understandings, let's say, and therein lies our let's say power, in fact, to give birth to new interpretations, right? So a text, of course, again, is written by an author, but it is again on, let me repeat this. It is on the reader, to interpret it, isn't it? So the reader has to be an active one. I mean, has to be actively engaged in interpretative reading, and that is actually what is needed. And for that, a certain level of critical maturity is needed. So we have to develop that critical maturity, in fact, in order to go through as modern a poet, a dramatist, a literature. I mean, I don't know how to really describe a man of Tagore's stature in just only one word. He was not only a poet, he was not only a dramatist, He was not only a playwright, he was not only a songwriter, he was not only a composer or a painter. He was everything. I think he was the fullest individual. I mean, the most let's say perfect individual. In fact, in that sense, I don't know whether, I mean, Tagore would have been very angry on us had he actually known that we are describing him thus, but to us he is thus. So that critical maturity we have to develop so that we could, read Tagore and infuse new meanings into such readings, into his texts. Right? So and the role of the reader is why it's so very important. Right? So as everyone knows about the concept of the death of the author is actually not dead. The author is alive, and the author is alive through us. Right? The author is alive and would be alive and would continue to be alive through us. So the responsibility is ours. The onus is on us as to how we would continue to keep the author alive. Right? So that is our responsibility, and we have to develop that faculty in us by reading more and more of such writers. Right? So with that, such writers, of course, as Tagore. So with that, I think we should come to the end of today's discussion. I thank Dr. Sajal Dey for the discussion today. There are some more chats in the box. Yes, of course, he was profoundly. I mean, I don't know who wrote this, but I completely agree with this, that he was definitely influenced by the Vedic philosophy, for sure. And as I said, that he was a transcendentalist. And where did his ideal of transcendentalism come from? Right? It is from the Vedic idea of transcendence. Right? So envisaging the universal soul as one, not as many. Right? So that universal soul, is the highest truth to the author over here. I mean, to an author like Tagore, or was the highest truth to Tagore. So he was definitely, for that universal consciousness, and he was trying to express, through his writings, that universal consciousness that he sees, or that he saw, that he experienced, in nature and in man, as I said. Yes, so I don't think there is any. So we would close for the day. I would like to thank everyone, of course, Dr. Dey, and then Umran, and what is our student's name? Swasti. And Fatima, and I can see Fusun Sari also. So great to see you, Fusun. Yeah, and all the members in the audience today for coming. I see, one of our colleagues as well. So I think Shravan was there. I don't know whether he's.
Yes, he was there.
Okay, yes. Okay, so thank you for coming and joining us today. It was great to have met you all after several days, in fact, and we would meet again tomorrow. So please stay tuned and log in to the same link tomorrow at 7 o'clock to discuss another very interesting writer, Alexandr Pushkin, who was perhaps one of the greatest, in fact, in Russia. So, so we would bring, another baggage of ideas with Pushkin, in fact, tomorrow to discuss with you all. So thank you all very much. I wish Rajiv was there. I wish Professor Bruce Lawrence was there. I wish Professor Miriam Cook. Rajiv said that they would be there. Professor Lawrence and Professor Cook would be there, but perhaps yes. But of course, I mean, I would have enjoyed their presence as well, as I very much did yours. So thank you all for joining us today. See you tomorrow at the same time. Thank you all very much.
Okay, thank you all. Swasti, Fatima, and others. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Mani, Mousumi, yeah.
This was
Thank you,
really
Dr.
truly
Dey, for
a
that
very
really
insightful session indeed, we must say, and we all become benefited. Thank you all very much, and especially I personally thank to both the professors, Dr. Banerjee and Dr. Dey. Only for them today we get to know a lot. We enriched ourselves rather. So thank you very much, professors, and thank you very much, everyone. And please do join tomorrow at the same time, by the same time, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. See you tomorrow.
Thank you.